It's not awesome. Drarsa. If a chicken was stepped on, or shatarfa b'koisel got thrown into a wall, or sharatzasa behema, or behema stepped on it, umefarcheses, and the chicken's alive, v'shasa meis le'es, it stayed alive for 24 hours, ushchata, and you shechted it then, ksheira. As long as there's no other mum that you can see, it's kosher. However, after shechting it, you have to check an internal check. Normally, we don't do an internal check because the chazaka, most animals are not a treifa. But even though it lived 24 hours, it requires a bedika. Because maybe it broke its ribs, or spinal column was broken, or the other yud ches treifas. And if it didn't stay alive for 24 hours, even if you checked it and you didn't find treifas, it's a treifa. Because one of the yud ches treifas is, it's called risuk evorim. That, if any of these actions that occurred to a chicken, even though you don't see a mum, it is considered as if it's a treifa, unless it lived for 24 hours. Then we know it didn't go through this process of risuk evorim. This is a Mesor from Sinai, that if an animal has risuk evorim, it cannot live 24 hours. Now, other treifas can live 12 months. So that's why you need to check it after shchita. So this is a little primer on the hilchos shchita and treifas. An even bigger question is, such an animal, could you shecht on yontif? Because mi mechaskin and ruhus b'yontif or low. Do we take into account that it's got this extra pagam, that it requires bedika, and if you boidik it and it's a treif, then it ends up you shechted for no reason. So you did the tircha yisera. So Amalei Tanina ain't malabnin sarafim litzos, but you can't heat up these stones till they're white hot in order to cook on them. V'avina b'maika of it. I mean, what is the aveira? We're talking about these new stones, but they should start lebotkan. So you have to check it afterwards to make sure there's no pagam. So just like it's usher by the stones, it's usher to shecht a chicken that afterwards you'd have to do bedika. So the Gemara says that's not amr le'anan they should start lechamsim as nisimah. We don't learn that it's mipnei shetzrichen lebadkan. It's because mipnei shetzrich lechamson. And that's not because they could become very hard. So it's not the reason that it needs bedika. So there's no raya to the chicken shaila. However, the halacha in the Shulchan Aruch is that a bird where there's a chashash, you're allowed to shecht it on yontif. You're not choishish that maybe you'll find it a treifa. Now, in our day, we don't shecht it all on yontif. Lechatchila. If you have to shecht for some reason,
the tile will be considered a makav patish then? To harden the tile? Be a makav patish, no?
you mark the patish with what?
The tile, it says you can't, it says you can't tile because it's necessary to harden them. So that's a makav patish. Why you can't do the tiles on yontif? You can't.
Right. It's not because of bedika problem.
You can't heat them.
No, right. But before we said the reason you can't heat up the tiles is because you needed a bedika. And that was going to give us a raya to the chicken question. But the Gemara ends up saying that the reason is because of, not because it needs bedika, but because of it has to harden. So it's a different reason why it's Asur and Yontif. So it's not the same reason that because it needs a bedika. Therefore, the halacha is you're allowed to shecht a chicken, at least before the minig today is not to shecht on Yontif. Unless there's a reason to shecht, nobody has food or whatever. Tanya, echad maybe a sa'ur. This is talking about bishul on Shabbos. One person brought the fire. Echad maybe a sa'itz. The other brought the wood. Echad shoifes a sakadeh. One brings the pot. Echad maybe a samayim. One brings the water. Echad noisem v'soichet tavim. One puts spices. Echad megis. The other one stirs. Kulam chayovin in bishul. Ay v'atanya achron chayav v'kulam p'turim. There's another brayso that says only the last person is chayav. If the fire was brought in initially and everything is done in heat, then the bishul process is started from the beginning and they're all chayiv. If everything was brought and the fire was brought last, so there was no heat, so there's no bishul. Only the last person who brought the fire would be chayiv. Bishma kulaka avdi ma'isa, I understand. Ela shoifet is like there, Ma'ikov, the guy who brought the pot, what kind of malacha did he do? Because the pot is going to get hardened by this process. The same like libun ra'afim, shum libun ra'afim, like the tiles. And like you say, it's makeh b'patish, you complete the kli. Toner Rabbanan. Toner v'kirayim chadashim, a new oven. Harehen k'chol ha'kelim haniton b'chatzar. They're not muktzah. You can't anoint them with oil. You don't wipe them with a shmata. You don't put cold water on them because it would harden it. If all of this is done for baking purposes, then harezeh mutter. Torah rabbanan molgin esarosh v'esaraglayim. You can pour water, warm water on the head or the feet of an animal because you want to get rid of their hair. Or you can singe them with fire. You cannot use like lime because not with dirt, not with clay,
plaster.
Because in all these things, it looks like you're doing a weekday work, which is tircha yisera, like tanning of a hide. You cannot remove their wool or their hair with scissors. You cannot trim the leaves off a vegetable with the. They used to have these vegetable scissors. There were these bitter vegetables that you had to cook for a long time. So that you're allowed to do. This is like a big baker's oven. You are allowed to fire that up. This is like a big water urn. You can heat up water. You couldn't bake in a new baker's oven. Maybe the fire is going to cause it to break, and then you're going to have to fix it, and it's extra tircha of yontif. You cannot, that's a bellows. You cannot use, like a blacksmith uses a bellows to blow air. So that's a professional item. You can't use that. You can do it using some kind of shinui, like some kind of horn. You cannot fix a spit That's something that you put meat on that you're going to grill. You can't sharpen it. You can't break a reed to make like a little bit of a spit to roast something. I guess you can hack walnuts covered with a shmata. You're not worried that the shmata will tear while you're doing this. I made Adam ala muktzah, Erev Shabbos b'shviyas. During Shemitah, you don't give my trumas and maasros. Rashi says, there's one Tana that is Mekil by Muktzah. So, Oy made Odam ala Muktzah. Let's say you have fruit that requires Hazmana. You have to designate it for use for Shabbos or Yontiv. And it's Erev Shabbos during Shemitah, which in that year there's no Trumas and Maasros. So tomorrow you can take from this fruit and you can eat it because there's no Maasro given. The only thing that's lacking in Azmana. As long as you designate and said, from this pile I'm going to eat tomorrow. So it's not that you need designation plus Meiser. No Meiser is given in Shemitah. You have to actually put a mark on it. It's not enough to just say. You have to make a siman because we don't hold of breira, according to these chachamim. Children buried figs Erev Shabbos in a field, so they could eat it on Shabbos. But they didn't give Meiser. So on Shabbos, they certainly can't eat it. And then L'motzi Shabbos lo yochlu elam ken isru. Motzi Shabbos, they can't eat it unless they give Meiser. Utnanami, hamavir te'enim b'chatzero liktzos. You moved figs from one place in your courtyard to another so that they should become dry. Now, let's say you did that on Shabbos. Bonov nevoisei oichlem aroy. His children can eat from it as long as it's a temporary eating. Because nachilas aroy is potem in amaiser. Boimene Ravam Rav Nachman. Shabbos Mausha Tikba Muktzah L'maiser B'dover Shelo Nigmar Malachto. You have something that it hasn't completed its process. It's figs that are not dried yet. Normally, you don't give meiser yet on something like that. And normally, so here, Shabbos has the koyach to make it like a Michael Kavua. There's no such a thing as a Sudas Aroy on Shabbos. So maybe the Shabbos will make it a Sudas Kavua. And it would require it to have Meiser, even for something that's not Nigmar Malachto. Everything you do on Shabbos is an Oinig, therefore, Kava, it makes it a Sudas Koveya, which normally would require Meiser. And even if the food item has not reached its completion. O Dilma, when do we say Shabbos is Koveya? B'dover shenigmar malachto kava. But b'dover shelo nigmar malachto loy kava. So that's the shaila. Omer lei. So he responded, Shabbos koivas bein b'davar shenigmar malachto bein b'davar sheloi nigmar malachto. Shabbos has the power to be koivea suda, even for something that's not nigmar malachto. Therefore, you'd have to give meiser. Amar lei v'emer Shabbos dumi to chotzer. Maybe Shabbos will be like chotzer. Ma chotzer ain't a koivas el b'davar shenigmar malachto. A chotzer doesn't have the power to be koivea unless the figs have reached its dryness. So maybe Av Shabbos like tikbel b'davar shenigmar malachto. Amar lei limud aruch b'yadin. This is a long Masorah in our hands. Shah Shabbos koivas bein b'davar shenigmar malachto bein b'davar sheloi nigmar malachto. It's a Masorah. And Amar Marzutra b'rei Rav Nachman Afanana mitanina. We have a Mishnah to support it. Odam Rabbi Eliezer. Oy made Adam la muktzar of Shabbos b'shvius. Our Mishnah. Taima, the reason why it works is the shvius to lav by Yisuru, because you don't give Trumas Maestros in the Shemitah year. Ha-bishar shnei shavua, but if in the other years, hachanami da aser, what? It would be aser, my taima. Isn't it lav mishum de Shabbos kova? Because once you hit Shabbos, it's going to require meiser? No. Shiny awesome. Kivin damer mikarani oichel amachar kova leiloi. Once he designated it, I'm going to eat from this fruit, he was koveya. So yochi mayer your Shabbos avil b'chol nami. So maybe if he's koveya l'sudaso, it's completed its work, and maybe you'd have to give meiser, forget about Shabbos. Kamashman, the tevel muchanu etzel Shabbos. Tevel, normally you can't eat tevel. So maybe you'd say you can't even make it muchan. Regarding Shabbos, you can make it muchan. Shim over v'tikno metukan. Because the Chazal don't want you to do it. But if you ended up giving meisers from it, it's meiser. Okay. Av Shabbos ain't a kovais l'meiser, but davar shenigmar malachto. The halacha is it only works for foods that are nigmar malachto. And if somebody is b'shoigeg, separates trumas and meisers, you can eat it. The mezid you can't eat it until Motzei Shabbos. But the fruit becomes not tevel if you were over the gzer rabbanan and gave meisers from it. So that's an important halacha.
Shkoyach, Ernie.
Okay.
Bye, Latel.
So